For those of you who don't know, but I also feature sarcastic commentary on my Patreon, which isn't posted anywhere else. I thought that it would be fun to highlight the top snark from every single day as an incentive to get people to join. I finally wrapped up the Shatter Me series. I'm glad not to have to read any more of that bad writing. Then I moved on to the third book in the Breach series. It's technically a trilogy, but what with the fourth book just being the first book, but from Nate's point of view. And finally, rounding out just one day, I seem to have a habit of that, with the first two chapters of Cursive by Phoebe Lane. I love how the world is full of X-Men, but the singular person Kenji blames for the latest shirt storm is a previously named character. Oh, who am I kidding? Literally nobody outside of a named character forking exists. I've been complaining about this from the third book on. Considering that when they abandoned ship, they left not only Adam but also James to fend for themselves. They don't get to now sit back and claim that they give a shirt about James. Literally every other character ended up at Norish's camp, except for Adam and James. And I'd like to remind you that the narration never gave two shirts about either of them after the author turned Adam into an angry insult, so it's hard for me to think that the author suddenly gives a hoot about James, when for 3 books she hadn't. 4 days of nothing. Jay is still sleeping. The twins are calling it a coma, but I'm calling it sleeping. Probably because you have no medical training or even knowledge. I wouldn't trust this baboon to put a bandage over a scraped knee. Friendly reminder that this is the last book in the series and we still don't know what these people want. What did the Nazis want? To unify the Germanic countries and to eliminate people that they saw as undesirable. The Jews, the gays, the black people, etc. What do these people want? Who the heck even knows? It has something to do with using the X-Men to take over the world, but to what end? What's their purpose after they do that? They want to remove all religion and culture, but again, to what end? What's going to replace all this? We don't know. We're 6 books into this and we still don't know. He says all this, but yet Evie never once actually tried to get Juliet under control. In the end, Evie died because Evie failed to stop Juliet from opening the door of the house and just walking away. That's literally what happened. This batch made contingency plans on top of contingency plans, but she failed to plan for Juliet forking, opening an unlocked door, and walking away. Like everything else in this book, this subplot has already taken up way too much time, and I know that it's nowhere close to being finished. We're now around 40% finished with this book, and is bringing this up just now. The narration should have condensed Kenji's worthless subplot and gotten rid of all those chapters in which Juliet was writhing around in her coma for 4 days. More Anderson play acting at keeping Juliet as a pet. If I found the first chapter with this to be tedious, let me tell you that this is even worse. It's adding literally nothing to the plot that hasn't already been established. Oh boy, more useless padding in which Kenji and Warner sit around and add nothing to the plot. I can't wait. Said nobody. Ever. However, this quickly devolves into a conversation about if people like Anderson should be forgiven for what happened and if people like them can change, which, okay, take your moral and philosophical debates to the novella, please. Now isn't the forking time for this bullshit. What about all that shirt you said to Jay the night we got here? What about all that talk about how inspiring she is and how so many people were moved by her actions, how she's basically a hero? What happened to all that nonsense? This is a joke, right? She gave a rousing speech that converted 100% of the soldiers and civilians in Sector 45 to her side. Yet, while the world turns from shirty to somehow even worse, where are literally any of those people? Julia didn't inspire anybody. She spoke to people who would have jumped off a cliff for one corn chip. Furthermore, considering how eager Kenji is to prop Juliet up as some great leader, he sure forking didn't act like it when she was actually in charge. Juliet was nothing more than a sock puppet to be used by whoever actually happens to be in charge at any given moment. Nazira had to fend off a few questions over the airplane radio, but because most of the military has no idea what level of shirt has already gone down, she still has the necessary clout to bypass inquiries from nosy sector leaders and soldiers. For the proof that the re-establishment is an uncontrolled mess. Literally not one single memo about, hey, maybe don't trust Nazira. It's been like a forking week and these idiots are still scrambling while Anderson plays dress up with Juliet versus Evie, who did it last week. There's literally no reason for everybody to be this out of the loop except for their own overinflated sense of worth and denial. Everything is fine. We're not losing control over the world. You know, when I was very young, I wanted to be a baker. Surprise shoots through me, widens my eyes. I know, he says, taking another swallow of the amber liquid. He almost laughs. Not what you'd expect, but I've always had a fondness for cake. Few people realize this, but baking requires infinite precision and patience. It's an exacting, cruel science. I would have been an excellent baker. Is it the author's attempt to Hitler was rejected from art school? Like, buddy, you can't humanize this level of monster no matter how hard you try, regardless of the fact that we're in the final half of the final book. If you thought that the plot would actually begin to progress now that our heroes are back in New Zealand, you clearly haven't been paying attention with the previous 5 books. Max, who's too terrified of his own creation to spend even a few minutes alone with the girl. As if the narration needed yet another reminder that Max and Evie are forking terrible parents, is the fact that random background characters can't even be bothered to call Juliet Max's daughter. They call her his creation, like she's some kind of Frankenstein's monster they whipped up in their basement, rather than a living child that Evie gave birth to. I would ask why he thinks that sexually assaulting Juliet would somehow work, but then I remember that he sexually assaulted her in the first book when she and Adam were trying to get away, and the narration never once addressed that. So, you know what? Might as well come full circle here. Even so, we remain cautious. There are still many around the globe who would love to bring back life to the emancipated remains of the re-establishment, and assassinating a beloved hero would be the most effective start to such a scheme. This is what this series should have been about after they assassinated Anderson. He stayed dead because that's not how forking science works, and then the rest of the series was nothing but them struggling to convince people that the re-establishment is not government goals. Lila, Nathan called from the closet, a frantic edge to his voice. Have you seen my black silk tie, the one with the cream-colored stripes? I looked around the room and smiled when my gaze hit the headboard. Oh, I'd seen it, and felt it the night before when he'd wrapped it around my wrist. Look, as if it's not bad enough that I was reading another pulled-to-publish Twilight fanfic where the main character left a guy named Nate for a guy named Drew, versus this story where the main character left a guy named Drew for a guy named Nate. But can we not directly copy from the most famous pulled-to-publish story? What? You do know your actions are hostile and I can file a complaint against you, right? I mean, you would know this if you read the handbook. It's been close to a year. If Delilah was going to have filed the complaint against them, you'd think that she would have already. They meet with the wedding planner, and oh my forking god, this entire thing is so goddamn tedious that I'm barely reading at this point. They get married. Even the author seems bored with the ceremony and following reception, and quickly gets both over with so that she can get back to them banging. That's it. That's literally the entire chapter. I'm barely reading at this point. I could have probably skipped the entire forking chapter and not have lost a single gosh darn thing. The dude stalked Delilah, pushed his way into her apartment, tried to rape her, tried to unalive her, and that's on top of whatever the Forky did to the other lady. Don't Forking tell me that he's gonna get a couple of Class Ds thrown at him. This man is a menace to society and shouldn't be walking around at all. I think we can all agree on that. I hope that the judge has a fun time explaining why this sociopath was walking around when the next time he manages to unalive somebody because there is nobody to pull him off from the woman. Oh gee, it's almost like constantly ignoring your problems isn't healthy or remotely useful. Who would have thought? When I had to say my name, she turned back to me and smiled. Adam stood up and screamed at me that I was a forking whore when it registered that I'd gotten married. He does realize that spontaneous outbursts like that make him look bad, right? This guy is literally an entire dollar short of a dollar. He doesn't even have a penny. Teachers and every other school employee are mandatory reporters. This means that if they think that a child is being abused, they have to act upon it. The fact that every single teacher in Delilah's life failed her tells me that there's a whole lot of stank going on in that town if every single person swallowed Stefan's lies without question. Following the case that removed Delilah from the home and put the entire family under investigation, all of the doctors and teachers who interacted with Delilah should have been investigated as well for covering up a literal decade of abuse. The narration seriously spent more time on them at Disney World than it did on their wedding ceremony and reception. The only saving grace is that at least it didn't sneak away to bang in the bathroom or whatever. The guy calls Nate paranoid and delusional and urges him to seek help, but But the problem is that this guy sounds like a gullible moron if he seriously thinks that the literal Italian mob went and keep tabs on everybody who has ever wronged them. The entire middle book where they went to a therapist a couple of times a week so that they could be forced together despite how obvious it was that they're terrible for each other. That dude was just for shirts and giggles, and after the author got bored she decided that they were magically cured. And about how Nate has regressed to popping pills and using sex in order to try and cure himself. Uh-huh. Eggshells. We were walking around, avoiding everything in a strange dance, all out of fear. Sweetie, you passed the last red flag several miles ago. You've intentionally ignored all warning signs. You're on your own at this point. Delilah randomly decides that out of all of the terrible behaviors Nate has done, she's going to draw the line at, I'm sending you away to protect you from the literal mafia. This lady is literally too stupid to be alive. I get that for most of his followers, it'll just be a power grab to take over Vinny's spot, but I find it hard to believe that there wouldn't be those who would just want revenge against Nate for having killed Vinny. Like, oh, I don't know, his daughter whom Nate put in jail? I would chest bump you, but you know, I have boobs and it's not very ladylike, so high five! I really wish that people who have lived 100% in isolation their entire lives would stop trying to write novels. Every forking line of dialogue in this forking book reads like it was written by somebody who has never once communicated with another human in her life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, then you can read the entire Snark in full context on Patreon for $1 a month. Come back next month for more out of context comments.